with its listener, in tune with you. That's what radio is all about. You are radio, and radio is you. So you deserve radio that reflects you and your world, your lifestyle, your aspirations, and your ever-changing music taste. Radio that keeps its finger on the pulse. Radio that delivers up-to-date news and well-researched content. A listener-led radio station. Radio that doesn't speak at you, but rather listens and engages you. The rebirth is here. Radio that laughs with you, cries with you, celebrates with you. Radio that understands you. Our purpose is to use the magic of radio to inspire the human race. That's why we do what we do. We listen to inspire. UFM, in tune with you. From investments to relationships, your go-to session for everyday matters. Pat Cash on Life and Money, 7 to 9 p.m. only on UFM. It's back to basics, in tune with you. Pat Cash on Life and Money.
After 7, it's a Tuesday evening, the 16th of July, and thank you so much for joining us once again. We're coming to you live from Johannesburg today, Life and Money with Malik Pat Cash Maloy. I hope you guys are well. Thanks to Mtlapi Modise for an interesting show, especially that interview with MEC Madota Sambata. We're grateful that he's well, he survived that accident. Terrible road that, by the way. I use it regularly when I travel between Rustenburg and Potchefstroom. I go there quite a lot. Yeah, we're coming to you live from Johannesburg, and we're actually launching our new podcast studio. Yeah, lovely digs. You can join us online as well. Giskelantla or bona mama faratlhatleng ako tsenetle o koro kumele re tle ka kwana go Gauteng re tle go buisana le mokhuthamaga gona le tiro entle ba dirang ka kwano Gauteng yaanong ya ka o re itse re batho ba ratang tswelopele re bone gore re tlisa kana mana re tle go bua le bona re botsolotse dipotsonyana gongwe re ka tsaya malebela le rona kere re teng le mo FM 103.9 ga o le ka kwano o ka tsena le mo internet jalo ufm.co.za ga ke ese gompieno ke na le Gauteng Agriculture and Rural Development MEC Vuyiswa Ramokgopa Ramokgopa ra bitsa o tlhemaina ga ra tla mala kere ke tle ke patetse toll gate ke tla kwano ra bitsa o tlhelle wa itse ke government of provincial unity ka kwano o file portfolio e botlhokwa ga o lebella ga o seka o ka re Gauteng ba tle gore sia ka tema gona le program engwe ba e dirang ya nguni cattle ya kere no ra itse re nguni ke dikgomo ga se batho tla re mo amogele MEC, good evening and welcome to Life and Money.
Thank you very much for having me, Pat. It's a pleasure to be here.
We appreciate you taking time to speak to us. I think we should have started by congratulating you on your appointment. I mean, I know it's early days, but how are things going so far?
Thank you. I mean, we've really hit the ground running. It feels like a month, but it's only been actually a couple days, probably a week. And really the first few days has just been about meeting the team, understanding the lay of the land, really getting a sense of what programs are currently running, how are they doing, meeting with some of the key stakeholders also in the industry. And from this week, end of this week and early next week, we'll now also be engaging with some of the communities, the beneficiaries of our programs. But it's been a busy last few days.
I refuse to believe this, and I read about about you and your upbringing, but I refuse to believe that you were actually born in Hillbrow. Seriously,
there are some decent people that come from Hillbrow, but remember it was the mid '80s, so it was a very different place at the time. In fact, Johannesburg is probably and was at the time one of the top cities of the world. Yeah. And so I'm a proud Gautenger. I'm a proud child of Hillbrow. And
any memories of Hillbrow that you still hold dear? Because when I think of Hillbrow, I think of Pretoria Street. I think of Three Sisters Cafe.
no,
I think
I have
of Look and
Fontana, you know
Listen.
Fontana, yes.
Whoa, no, you were born in Hillbrow.
No, and that was our local store. I mean, I was born on Smith Street,
Okay.
just very close to Joubert Park, actually.
yeah.
And, you know, as a child, I would go and play there. I would take walks there. But what really stood out for me was just the cultural dynamism of Hillbrow. You know, it was, even at the time, a relatively mixed area racially and otherwise culturally. My parents were in the arts, so we also spent a lot of time with people in the creative industries, in the performing arts, and it was a really, you know, bustling environment. And I think, as such, I am a child of the city, even though you can put me anywhere, but that is the world that I grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the artists in Johannesburg at the time, either you lived in Hillbrow or Berea.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
I understand that your dad was a retired performing artist.
Yes, that's correct.
Leslie, yeah.
Yes, Leslie Mongezi Muchekwane. That was my original surname, and he was an actor. I think those of a previous generation would be probably more familiar with him. Ising Luna, I'm talking about like a previous generation.
Sure, thank you.
And and as I said, you know, I grew up in that world. My mom was in the advertising industry. My dad was a dancer, you know, a ballet dancer, and he performed at the Market Theatre. We spent a lot of time at the Market Theatre. In fact, I was almost born there. My mom was watching a show at the Market Theatre the day she went into labor, and not too long after I was born. So
did you dabble in the arts at all?
I did in high school.
Yeah,
I mean, I did drama.
Okay.
And I think actually, you know, drama helped in some ways. Maybe it was also preparation for where we are, for where I find myself now, because you had to learn to do public speaking, to be comfortable on stage, etc.
Is Dad retired, or he was just tired of being typecast?
No, it is. Yeah, he is retired, but I'd say he's gone into different forms.
Okay.
As you would know, the South African the arts are very difficult. It's a difficult industry to be in South Africa. It is not as well developed as it could be, and as such, a lot of performing artists find it difficult to reach the heights at which, you know, they may have reached in other countries. And I think he's done a lot of different things. I mean, now he's also kind of in the fine arts. He's also doing a lot more community work now. I mean, he's like 70, so he's doing a lot of community work and helping young people who are training and up and coming actors and performing artists.
Do you think your parents are listening? Because I want to skin a little bit about
No, I don't.
Nah. Okay.
Let it rip.
Okay. Any of these movies that you enjoyed? Because I think the last one that he was in, a big one, was Goodbye Bafana. I think he played Walter Sisulu.
Yes.
Growing up, were there any of these movies that he made you guys watch? You have to watch this.
No, not really. Not really, but obviously we would watch things here and there. There was another film called Red Dust, which was an international film, but also a lot of local productions. He did a stint in Generations, and I think he hated doing TV, but that period of time was also just quite crazy, because now a lot of more people would recognize him and come up to us in the shopping center and be like, oh, Mike, his name was Mike in the show. And so I mean, he did so many different things, and that was just our life,
Voiceover artist.
Voiceover artist, So.
And Mom, for a very long time, was into business.
Correct, still.
Advertising and
still,
business,
she's still running her own business. She started her company in the early 90s. So I've had the benefit of, it was hard at times. It wasn't always just easy, but I'm saying I've had the benefit of having a front row seat to watching my mother running her business and being an entrepreneur, essentially, for the last 30 years.
Would it be fair to say that she would have played a bigger role in, a decision in terms of your career path, Mom?
Look, I think indirectly and directly, in that having run her own businesses and my having had the opportunity to see that and grow up in that environment, made it easier for me to make the decision to go into business. But also my parents they've never imposed their ideals on me.
Okay.
So they've always allowed me to make my own choices and to choose my own path. And so there was never a time where she kind of pushed me in any direction, you know, but you learn by seeing and by what you're exposed to. And I'd say seeing that lifestyle of somebody who was self-employed gave me a greater sense of the direction I wanted to go in my life.
But later on, we'll talk about a decision you took to open a store downtown.
Yes.
Very brave.
Yes.
But then, so Hillbrow, then you end up in Cape Town, schooling there.
Yeah. Oh, you've done your research, hey?
Well,
yeah. Well, let me sip my water.
What happened there? I mean, folks are in Joburg, you end up in Cape Town, and just to wrap up the school part, then there was Dakar in Senegal as well. What happened there?
Yeah, so my mom actually, who was in advertising, as I said, at the time, before she went into business, she was working for one of the big advertising agencies. It was at the time when African language broadcasting became a priority, and they suddenly realized that we actually need to talk to African people. So her specialty is actually, she runs a communications company, still to this day, but her specialty was writing ads in the different vernacular languages. And so she speaks, reads, and writes so many of our languages as a result of that. So we then moved to Cape Town because she got a job opportunity there. And that's where I started my schooling. You've mentioned Dakar at some point.
Yeah.
When my parents split up, and so my mom also remarried at some point, and that then took us out of the country for a period of time. Again, I was a child, so I just go where I'm told.
Oh, yeah.
But, it was a beautiful experience. Again, the ability to see the continent, to experience Africa in a very different way, particularly West Africa, to be exposed to different languages, different cultures, everything. It also, I'd say, gave me a certain perspective on the world, and I love this continent and I love this country, and that's why I've made the choices that I've made, I think, even today, because I really want to see this continent thrive.
And then you were 25, I think, when you took that decision to start a retail clothing boutique downtown Johannesburg. This is what, 19? Probably
19. Please don't age me.
Sorry. What is it, 2000 and...
Yeah, I was actually 23.
Uh-huh.
It was 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, 2009.
Had you completed your studies?
Yeah. I'd actually been working for a bit of time at that point. So I studied politics, and then realized as soon as I finished and got a degree in my hand that I was effectively unemployable, because there was actually no company that was saying we're looking for politics graduates or economics graduates. It was a kind of a weird thing. So I joined the Edgar's Edcon graduate program, trainee program. It was a wonderful opportunity. They were training buyers and planners, and so I became a buyer, a retail.
End Street.
It was in Crown Mines.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in Crown Mines. So, and then they had a really great trainee program, and I joined the trainee program, and I trained to be a retail buyer. And soon I was a fully fledged, retail buyer, and it piqued my interest in the industry. And after spending about 2 years in the corporate space, I kind of also felt that corporate really wasn't for me, and that's when I went out and started my own clothing boutique, which is the one you speak about in Braamfontein. It was called 22 actually at the time, because that's when the decision was made. I was 22 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was my first taste of paying school fees, of the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
I cashed in my little pension fund at the time. These corporates, they usually you contribute to your pension.
Sure.
I cashed it in. I thought it was like millions of rands. It wasn't. It was like 100,000 rand at most at the time.
Which was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
And after tax, by the way, after tax, it was like 65,000 rand or something ridiculous like that. And and then I found this store, paid the rent, went and bought furniture at these secondhand stores, and started buying stock and selling. And yeah, so I was in business for a few years, but it was tough. It was
But
tough.
let me ask though, you went and studied politics,
Yeah.
BCom in politics, philosophy and economics from
Yeah.
UCT.
Yeah.
What was the idea there? Was it that, at some point you thought you were going to be an academic? Was it a plan along the line that you were going to end up in politics somehow? What was the reason for you studying politics?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't like a well thought out career plan, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I was just doing what I love. I've always been interested in the way the world works. Politics and economics are the key drivers of what of the way the world works, you know. And one of the things in particular that really bothered me was the state and the rate of economic inequality in South Africa, even at that point. I mean, at 18 years old, it bothered me. And I had this question on my mind of wanting to understand, like, how does the world work and why do we find ourselves in a situation like this, and looking for those solutions. So I chose to do a PPE because I thought it would open up my mind, and it did, certainly. But it wasn't necessarily, at the time, I didn't have in mind that I was going to pursue a career in whatever, yeah.
The Institute of Black Property Practitioners,
Yeah.
where you ended up as CEO. Was it more about transforming the sector, or about black representation, particularly of women, for you?
All of the above. It was about transforming the sector, but not just the sector, the economy as a whole. Because property, actually real estate, as an asset class, is globally the primary store of wealth. So in terms of, let me say, the building blocks of wealth creation, real estate is responsible for 70% of wealth in the world. It's actually held in real estate. And so, again, thinking about our country and thinking about one of the issues that we face in our country, which is the lack of property ownership, the lack of black property ownership, and we know the historical context of that, the land issues that we have, as well as, just the access to the financial mechanisms to be able to acquire property. And so, again, I was very interested in the transformative impact of real estate and of property. And it was amazing because working in that institution gave me an ability to, give input to policy, to work with different business associations, industry associations, and also with government, and to really get a sense of kind of how all of the pieces fit together, because on one hand, if you're dealing with the mortgage industry and the property financing space, you are now dealing with the banks.
Yeah.
And again, mortgages, and I don't know if people know this, but mortgages make up 50% of the bank's income. Like commercial banks in general, 50% of their income comes from mortgage loans. It is a massive industry and a massive contributor to our economy. And it has such an impact in terms of how we are then able to build the building blocks of wealth and ultimately transform our economy and transform our country.
Do you think your time there, do you think you were successful? What were some of the obstacles that you would have faced that you can talk to us about?
Well, without trashing anyone, but I'd say I think one of the biggest obstacles was government. You can make input to policy. You can advocate for change. You can give suggestions and ideas. You can even draft and write policies, which in my case I physically did. I co-wrote and was part of writing the transformation chapter in the Property Practitioners Act that is active right now. I was very active in that. I wrote policies also for the National Department of Public Works that were focused on transformation. But what I realized is that where it really fell apart was in the implementation thereof. And it's not, it just isn't enough to be on the sidelines and to constantly be giving input. It's important, by the way. I'm not saying it's not important. You know, civil society and professional associations play a very important role, but they can't be talking into a vacuum. There has to be somebody on the other side who can catch the ball and who can say, thank you, that's a great idea, let me go implement it. And for me, that was what was lacking and missing.
You now in the political space, and we'll reflect on some of the business achievements along the way before you get into politics. We're going to go for a short break. And politics, particularly in this country, is notorious for having a glass ceiling for women. I'd love to hear what you think about that. It's like, we've decided that women can only go this far. There'll be 2 elections where we're touting a female president, and then for whatever reason, the argument just dies. You've entered the arena now. How do you feel about that? That glass ceiling, seemingly.
Look, I think that we can't pretend that we have to be honest about the society we live in. We do live in a very patriarchal society across the board. We live in a very traditional and conservative society across the board. So as much as I think we have made great strides in terms of representation of women, our parliament is one of the most representative parliaments in terms of gender diversity. But to the point that you're making, there still does appear to be, I don't want to say, maybe a reluctance to see women in those number 1 spots.
Yeah.
So it's not even just in politics, even in the business sector. I mean, look at the JSE. And the percentage of, if you look at the listed companies across the JSE, you can count the number of female CEOs on your hand. And that's not a coincidence. It's because power reinforces itself. If I am a powerful person, I am likely to be close to people who are similar to me, or bring closer people who are similar to me. If I walk into a bank and I'm a white man and I've got a startup and I'm sitting across the table from another white man, and that is the person who's making the decision, we are likely to get along better with each other. And so power has a tendency to replicate and reinforce itself. And so I think, for me, we are making strides, but we have to be a lot more deliberate about putting women in positions of power, actively doing that, so that we can start to see that change actually accelerating.
It's 27 after 7. If you've just joined us, we're in conversation with Gauteng Agriculture and Rural Development MEC Vuyiswa Ramokgopa. I'm sure you hate this question when they ask you, any relation? I'm sure you hate it.
Yes.
It comes
Indirect. Yeah. No, I don't hate the question.
Okay.
I think it's a reasonable question, but I'm saying, so I have indirect relations.
Okay.
I am married I'm a married Ramokgopa, not a born Ramokgopa. But in saying that, I'm very proud to have the name and to be associated.
Because, people make all sorts of jokes, and it's a wonderful joke. I love it. We've got a new season in this country, Ramokgopa season.
Is it the Ramokgopa season?
Yeah.
Okay, then so be it, I suppose.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with our discussion. Re tlhole mo mafaratlhatlheng, re teng mo social media, ga le gore teng mo bo Twitter jalo, re kopa o tsene. Let's follow each other. Re buisana le ba mo Gauteng Agriculture and Rural Development, Mokhuduthamaga jalo. It's Life and Money on UFM. Thanks for being in tune with us.
has begun with you, the legendary Vincent Maseko.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
Ushering in your mornings with Malome Tap on your wake-up call. Kapelo Entle, you before noon takes over the airwaves with gratifying heart-to-hearts until noon. Then there comes the madness. Your boost of unlimited laughs with the ever so vivacious Michelle. And just like that, we have made a safe landing on 3 to 6 Avenue. From 7 p.m., we seek unprejudiced answers on UFM News Hour. Pat Cash on About Life and Money until 9 p.m. Hosi Tsimecha makes you feel at home as we wrap the day on nighttime with you. Wondering what happens during the weekend? It's still back to basics. In tune with you. Here's to the rebirth of radio. Radio that's in tune with its listener. In tune with you. That's what radio is all about. You are radio and radio is you. So you deserve radio that reflects you and your world, your lifestyle, your aspirations and your ever-changing music taste. Radio that keeps its finger on the pulse. Radio that delivers up-to-date news and well-researched content. A listener-led radio station. Radio that doesn't speak at you, but rather listens and engages you. The rebirth is here. Radio that laughs with you, cries with you, celebrates with you. Radio that understands you. Our purpose is to use the magic of radio to inspire the human race. That's why we do what we do. We listen to inspire. UFM, in tune with you. Pat Cash on Life and Money.
So you were a member of the Black Business Council's National Council since 2018. You were a member of the BRICS Women's Business Alliance Executive Committee, and in 2018 you founded Women on the Rise. Take us through that moment when now there's a decision for you to get into active politics. You studied politics, you've got this experience in business. Now there's an opportunity for you to represent a party, or you're co-forming a party with people, and you want to go into politics. The conversation in the home space. We know how toxic politics can be. They can use anything against you. Talk to us about that moment. Take us to that moment. Something that triggered you to go, but we need to get together and form an organization to fix this. Take us there.
Look, it was quite a number of successive moments of reckoning. It doesn't happen sort of overnight. When I formed Women on the Rise in 2018, it was at the time when there was an outcry nationally about gender-based violence as a big issue that had arisen in the news. And the intention was not to have an organization to deal with gender-based violence, but really to engage the question of how, as women, we can, we may be the majority in numbers, we may be significant contributors economically to the country, but yet we struggle to make our agenda a priority when it comes to issues of national importance and politics. And one such example is if you just look at the Department of Women and Youth and what. I mean, it's one of the departments that receives the smallest budget of them all.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, if not the smallest budget. I haven't looked at the recent one, but in previous budgets, it would receive the smallest budget of them all. Now, that is a department that's accountable for women, youth, and people with disabilities. And so it just gives you a sense of how, from a policy perspective, the issues of women are often kind of like, oh yeah, let's also include 30%, and that wasn't good enough for me. So the purpose of that was to say, let's get around a table as women and have a discussion about how we can translate our influence into actual political action. It wasn't about starting a political party, but rather saying, how do we actually galvanize political power, and starting those conversations. Step 2 was actually, I think, the moment of reckoning, which was during COVID and during the COVID lockdowns. And just, again, really being faced with the violence of inequality in our country. And the way that lockdown and particularly COVID itself exposed the disparities, whether it was in healthcare,
every industry,
in human settlements and urban planning, spatial planning, everything. We were laid bare as a country at that point in time. People who were being told to stay at home because there was a pandemic had to stand in food queues because there was no other way for them to eat, and so those types of things, you can't sleep well at night knowing that is how the majority of the country is living. And it also became very clear at that point that we had a leadership crisis, because the way that a lot of those, the state of emergency and everything was dealt with from whether it was from communication to just general programming. I think, remember the chicken gate, where people were told they couldn't buy Woolies chicken and all kinds of ridiculous things. But it just also laid bare
the graves that were being dug in this.
The graves that exactly it laid bare the dearth of leadership in politics, and the fact that people were stealing the very funds that were allocated for COVID. I mean, in the height of a pandemic, people have time to loot. People were sanitizing classrooms that had no children in them and putting out tenders for 300 million. So that really for me was like, it was the line in the sand. And I said, we can sit here on social media and complain until we're blue in the face, or we can do something. And I had a similar reckoning clearly to a number of other people, and we kind of got ourselves together. When you see people who are always complaining about the same things on social media, we knew each other loosely, and then we thought, what, let's get off social media. Let's get onto a Zoom call and talk to each other and do something. And so that is really how things started moving. Our national leader, Songezo Zibi, then later on published his book, Manifesto, which in many ways articulated, I think, a lot of the frustrations that we were also feeling and the things that had come about. And so, we got introduced to each other, and that one thing led to another, and today we have Rise Mzansi. Was
there any resistance in the family?
Of course. I mean, it's a difficult decision, even from a personal perspective. But I have been very blessed. My husband, is very supportive of everything that I do. But it is a big choice, because when you go into politics, it's not just about you. You do end up bringing your whole family along with you. You have to think about your children. I have 3 children. I have a husband, I have my parents, I have my family. And you always think, one day when my name is in the paper for the wrong reasons, and your mother's church friends are going to be involved in that, So those are the things you have to think about. But I have had incredible support from my family on all sides of the family. And I have never doubted for a moment that, this is what I should be doing, and that those who care about me are behind me.
So Rise Mzansi is formed. You were the national coordinator at some
National
point.
chairperson.
National chairperson, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
And then premier candidate.
Yeah.
We go to elections, and the numbers come out. Were you disappointed in terms of how your party fared in elections?
Look, I think the first reaction was similar to what a lot of South Africans experienced, which was just being genuinely surprised at the outcomes of the elections. I could never actually have anticipated, even in my best projections, I could never have anticipated the surprises that came out of this election. So let me say I was a bit surprised and blindsided by some of the variables. And what I mean by that, even if you look at the former governing party, yes, one would have anticipated a reduction, but not to the extent that we saw.
Yeah.
One knew there was a party called MK, but you could never have imagined that they would have performed in the way that they, and so on and so forth. So there were so many variables that we didn't predict. But in the fullness of time, we are, and I'm particularly very proud of our performance, because when one looks at parties that historically had been represented in Parliament that didn't make it back, when you look at parties that spent 10 times more than we did on the election, but only managed to grow by like 0.5, 1%. And of course, you look at parties like the ANC, the former governing party, that has lost 17 percentage points in one election. I think it is phenomenal that an unknown, untested party like ourselves, with complete unknown individuals behind it, could manage to contest and win 2 seats in the National Assembly and a seat in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. And I think for our first election, it's a phenomenal performance.
Let's talk about your appointment as MEC. What are the top priorities for your department?
So there are really 3 key priorities for me. And it does follow on actually from what we campaigned about and the promises and the what we shared with the public during the campaign. The first priority is ending hunger. Now, I know it sounds like, really, this girl's going to end hunger.
Idealism.
But we have to say it, because if we don't aim for that, then we never get there. And we always used to say we mustn't talk about poverty alleviation. We're not trying to make poverty a little bit better. We must be bold enough to say we want to end poverty. So for us, we are making a bold statement that this is the first step towards ending hunger.
How do we do that?
Because nobody in this country should be going to bed hungry when we are a middle income country and we are a net exporter of food. So there are clearly just inefficiencies in our food system that end up in the result of 1/4 of our population going hungry. So, and I'll get into the how just now, but I just want to take you through the top 3 priorities. So number 1 is ending hunger. Number 2 is the commercialization and expansion of small-scale farmers. So you will have, of course, subsistence farming, but you also have small-scale farmers who are trying to get that access to the broader commercial and export market and need to be supported and capacitated as such. That's number 2. And then number 3 is unemployment and reducing our really shocking rates of unemployment in this country and in this province. Gauteng is the most populous province of them all, 16 million people, of which just over 2.5 million are unemployed. Well, recorded, the number that's recorded. Sure. But we know we're sitting at about 8 million plus people unemployed in our country. And so we need to, and the agricultural industry actually can be a real catalyst for driving employment. So we're looking at industrialization programs through the agro-processing and the various aspects of the value chain. But we're also looking at pipelining unemployed graduates into the private sector, the non-profit sector, as well as in government.
Hey, and then there's this project that's actually the reason why I'm here.
Really? One project.
Well, cat's out of the bag. The Nguni project. Most of us from other provinces, when this project was launched recently, I think the current leg of it was launched, we were pretty envious. Talk to us about the idea behind it and how far the rollout is at this stage.
So it actually wasn't launched recently. I think probably people have just become aware of it, but it was launched in 2015. Yeah. So it's been almost 10 years that it has been active. But I think, obviously it's gone through a number of different iterations. And really the objective here was to be able to capacitate, emerging farmers in the Nguni livestock farming space, but to get them to actually transition then into becoming, larger scale commercial farmers who can then also supply to the domestic market as well as the export market. And you'll appreciate that Nguni the byproducts of Nguni farming are both food products like the beef, but also the hide that you're able to treat and sell into the retail space and et cetera, et cetera. So that is the intention. Now, how the program works is essentially you are given, the department will supply you, if you meet the requirements, obviously, the department supplies you with 30 pregnant heifers, as they call them. And the benefit, obviously, of them being pregnant heifers is the fact that you then also have the sustainability aspect. So you know that you've got your current herd, and then following that, you will then get additional as time goes on. And there's other forms of capacitation and support that you're given throughout that process. And the idea is that you are then able to grow at a much faster rate and be able to go toe-to-toe with any of the other commercial farmers. But I mean, I'll preempt, I suppose what's been really making the headline news this week is there has been a bit of an outcry of people who have been raising concerns about the fact that the requirements, one of the requirements that is stated on the advertisement, requires people to actually have access to, I think it's 500 hectares of land, which, as you can imagine, in a Gauteng context, is not every Jim, Joe, and Jabu does not have 500 hectares of land, and that's a very real thing. But what those in the industry will also be able to understand is that, there are industry norms and standards around the breeding of Nguni cattle, and those are regulated at a national level. So for one Nguni cow, you need to have 5 hectares of land. That is what is regulated, right? So if
it doesn't come from your office.
No, it's not from my office. This is the law of the land, and it enables, obviously, because there needs to be room for grazing, and just health and safety and veterinary standards, etc. So that is what is prescribed in terms of the industry norms and standards to be able to raise and breed Nguni responsibly, and that is what has guided the specification of 500 hectares, because if you are given 30, right, and those 30 have another, they are pregnant, so they've got another 20 maybe that are coming, we are estimating you're going to probably sit with about 50. And so at a bare minimum, you need 5 hectares for each of those cows. And so it's really thinking around that. So, but in saying that, we are, it's a national program. We are contributing to that national program.
It's a national program.
It's a national program, yeah.
That's another, a shortcoming in terms of the communication.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a national program. We have some allocation of that of budget that enables us to participate in that program. I actually met with some of the department officials today. I was informed that in the last 10 years since the program launched, there have been some successes, been a number of farmers, black, female, women farmers, many of whom are women, who have benefited from the program and have actually been able to go on to make quite successful enterprises. So, I think what's important also, just as a last note, is that there are a number of programs that exist within the department for people at different levels and also within different streams. So Nguni cattle is not the only farming that one can do, of course. There are programs that are targeted at piggery. There are programs that are targeted at poultry farmers. I mean, poultry farming is a massive industry as well. And also within the horticulture, the vegetables and fruits and whatever. So I think it's very important for people not to kind of have a sense that this is all that's on offer and all of us must go there.
Well, we're hoping that, the communication will be a lot better, with your arrival. We don't want to disrespect anyone who held the portfolio before. But with the greatest respect, sometimes communication in terms of the good work that we do has not been that great. Honestly, I was waiting for you to talk about the program, then I was going to challenge Northwest, for an example, to say, hey, look what Gauteng is doing. And when you say it's a national program, it's like, oh, okay, penny drops.
No, absolutely. And I take that. That recommendation. I think that communication is important, and that's one of the things that we definitely want to have. We want to be more deliberate about. I've made it very clear that this administration, our 3 pillars, is transparency, accountability, and accessibility. We want to be available
Yeah.
to the people of Gauteng, and information should be easily accessible, and people should be able to know what's going on.
What about agricultural communities and areas in Tshwane, Sidibeng, West Rand, Ekurhuleni, those municipalities? I mean, are there any specific plans for those communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of programs actually already underway. As I've mentioned, and in the areas that you've spoken about, the West Rand, Hammanskraal, I think Hammanskraal, Sidibeng, etc. There are a number of programs, and as I said, they range across a number of different areas. So in the West Rand, for example, I know one of the focus areas there is vegetable farming. And there's piggery also happening, I think, in Tshwane, and there's a number of different programs. So what I would encourage those who are looking or from those areas is to actually get in touch with the department and see which are the focus programs and which are targeted towards those areas, because as you'll appreciate also, different areas are more suitable for different things.
Definitely.
And so that's why we also kind of target specific areas.
What legacy do you want to leave behind once your term of office comes to an end?
Well, aside from actually making inroads on the priorities, but I think, unemployment is the biggest travesty. It's the biggest crisis of our times right now. The fact that almost 2/3 of our country, and of young people especially, are unemployed is a real crisis. So I think one of the things that I've made very clear is that we need to make serious inroads on dealing with the unemployment rate, but also just elevating this sector to where it should be. Every single one of us, if we are blessed, we eat every day. We eat every day.
Yeah.
And yet many of our children they don't even learn about food and agriculture in schools. They don't even consider it as a career option. It's not even something that is aspired to by many young people. So I'm hoping that hopefully part of what we do will be to make agriculture fashionable and interesting and an area of interest for people. We have a lot of discussion about land reform in our country, and that's brilliant. But we need to be able to say, when we conclude that discussion about land reform, we must have a cohort of people that are trained, that are able to then take up those opportunities and actually lead in the agricultural sector.
How do you balance being a career woman and a wife and a mother of 3?
Well, I don't do it alone. They say it does take a village to raise children. And I'm very blessed, as I said, to have a very supportive husband. But it's a team, I think I'm a team player of note, and I believe that if you surround yourself with good people and with the best people, you can achieve anything.
Would you allow your kids to be politicians?
I think after experiencing it from my side, they probably wouldn't want to be. But yes, I would, because I do think at the heart of being a politician is having a heart of service. Well, at least for me it is, and my desire to want to serve the people of Gauteng and the people of South Africa is what has led me here. And so if they also felt called to do the same, I would support them.
Just the last one. Do you think this government of provincial unity, do you think it will hold? Because a lot of us, we're nervous. We've seen what happened with coalitions in the past. We're excited.
Yeah.
Even at a national level, markets are performing brilliantly.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot more talent from South Africans, people like yourselves, in different portfolios as well. But we're worried, looking at the history of recent times.
I think what everybody has now realized is that the days of single-party majority rule are over in South Africa. So this is the new normal. And on that basis, I think that there is a much higher level of interest in trying to make it work, because the alternative is not somebody governing by themselves. The alternative is probably governing with someone worse. You know what I'm saying? So I think that the moment that we are in politically, I'm not saying it's foolproof. we got to get the egos out the room. We've got to get, people who have a heart for the people in the room. But I'm saying the time calls for a level of maturity and sobriety in politics. And I think, the leaders have stepped up to the moment. Even the fact that we have a GNU and we have parties that were ideologically very opposed to each other and who were, at each other's throats during the election campaign, saying all kinds of things about each other. They were able to kiss and make up and say, let's run a country. And I think that does give me some hope about what the future holds.
MEC Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
We truly appreciate it. And we wish you all the luck, especially with transparency and being accessible. I think you'll pick up a lot of wins in that space as well.
Please do continue to hold me accountable. In a year when I sit here, you must ask me what I've done.
You're coming back in a year. Well, thank you.
I'm inviting myself.
1 year, the MEC will be back. But thank you so much and all the best.
Thank you.
MEC Vuyiswa Ramokgopa mo Gauteng go na le maele a mantsinyana ke solfelang gore re itsetse ona go na le programa tse dintsi tse leng gore re ka ithuta tsona mo Gauteng tse leng gore di teng nationally. It's Life and Money, 4 minutes to 8 o'clock. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
On Twitter, in tune with you.
Awesome, yeah. Appreciate the effort.
Wake up, Sele, croissants, or a smoothie. It's the weekend breakfast served to your liking with Pat Cash, 6 to 10 a.m. only on UFM. It's back to basics, in tune with you. ufm.co.za. In tune with you. Here's to the rebirth of radio. Radio that's in tune with its listener. In tune with you. That's what radio is all about. You are radio and radio is you. So you deserve radio that reflects you and your world, your lifestyle, your aspirations, and your ever-changing music taste. Radio that keeps its finger on the pulse. Radio that delivers up-to-date news and well-researched content. A listener-led radio station. Radio that doesn't speak at you, but rather listens and engages you. The rebirth is here. Radio that laughs with you, cries with you, celebrates with you. Radio that understands you. Our purpose is to use the magic of radio to inspire the human race. That's why we do what we do. We listen to inspire. UFM, in tune.